Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, and the focus of this presentation is the extent to which Hitler and the Nazi Party persuaded Germans to give their support. Now, whether they were coerced or forced into doing so, or whether they were overwhelmed by the Great Depression into doing so, are clearly the alternative perspectives. But the ground I cover in this presentation will help with any question that refers to popular support. Now, this support could be shown at the ballot box, or in mass demonstrations, or through the growth in party membership. And we see all of this with the Nazi Party. In free elections, the Nazi vote peaked in the July 1932 election at just short of 14 million votes, or 37.4% of the vote, making it by far the biggest party in the Reichstag, with almost 100 seats more than the next biggest party, the Social Democrats. It dipped in November to a fraction over 33%, but let me point out something that I think is very important. In the last British general election, with a first-past-the-post electoral system, the Labour Party won a whopping majority with just 33.7% of the vote. And don't forget how the mass demonstrations and the marches across Germany had given the sense of a huge passionate movement, how party membership had grown, and how party members absolutely adored Hitler. But where did the vote come from, and why? Let me answer the second question first. The almost schizophrenic answer is two opposites: negative cohesion and social cohesion. Negative cohesion united people in what they were against rather than what they were for. The Nazis were promising a radical alternative. More than that, a radical new start for Germany. They were proposing a revolution, away with the old and the rotten. The Nazis promised they would sweep it all away. For many amongst the middle classes, this meant the communists and socialists and weakening trade unionism. For others, across all classes, it meant Weimar, proportional representation, and a system that created paralysis. And it meant the Treaty of Versailles too. For most of the traditional elite, it meant democracy itself. For the older generation that had fought in World War I, there was resentment at the armistice, the Treaty of Versailles again, their hatred of the November criminals, and the further resentment of the French occupation of the Ruhr. And let me just add that the Nazis' anti-Semitic stance was not a big vote winner. But it wasn't all negative. For others, there was a sense of social cohesion or solidarity, a common belief in a community of all Germans, united and strong, a national people's community, and national regeneration. These were all positives. Germany would get its standing back and its pride back. But extreme nationalism was far less important, not to the vote. And on an entirely pragmatic level, for workers and the middle classes alike, the Nazis offered an end to the nightmare that the Depression had become. Profits and jobs would return under the Nazis. And that was the biggest vote winner. Now, I've already identified where the Nazi vote came from, but let me spell it out. The Nazi Party was the first genuine Volksparty, a people's party appealing to all classes. Farmers were the first to vote for them in significant numbers. But middle-class shopkeepers and small businessmen, craftsmen, were early supporters too. And in 1930 they made gains in all classes. They appealed to increasing numbers of the professional, mercantile and industrial middle class. They appealed particularly to former officers in the army. They also appealed to increasing numbers of the working class, despite the dominance of the Social Democrats and Communists here. So that somewhere around 40% of new recruits to the Nazi Party between 1925 and 1932 came from the working class. And almost 30% of the Nazi Party's votes were manual workers, with a majority of recruits to the SA coming from the working class too. As the Social Democrat and Communist vote remained high, this will have been made up of previously non-committed voters, mostly from the self-employed craftsmen and non-unionised workers. But it was significant. The younger voter was important as the large pre-war birth rate impacted. It has been estimated that some 4 million voters had come of voting age since the previous election just 2 years before. That's in the 1930s I'm talking about. But they actually didn't seem to vote disproportionately for the Nazis. In fact, the Nazi vote was stronger amongst older generations who had experienced so much suffering. The female vote was also significant, as they had increased as a proportion of the total, due to the loss of lives in the war. The bottom line was that the Nazi Party emerged in the 1930s as the party that most transcended German society's different classes and groups. And yet ultimately, would anything Hitler and the Nazis stood for or against had won over so many Germans without the Great Depression and the massive rise in unemployment? And it's that thought that I'll leave you with. I hope this pretty short video for me proves useful for you and that your studies are going really well. If you're finding my videos useful, do please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and tell your friends about it. It's you that gives me the motivation to make these videos. But for now, let me thank you for listening and wish you the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.